He just wanted to keep a promise. At 80 years old, Elijah Brooks boarded a plane with one goal: to sit beside his late wife one last time. But when a flight attendant demanded he give up his seat for a younger, wealthier passenger, everything spiraled. Public humiliation, a stolen passport. His name broadcast over the intercom like a criminal. What no one knew: Elijah wasn't just an old man. He was the reason millions of flights were safe. And when his truth came out, the entire flight and the system behind it would never be the same. Elijah Brooks stepped slowly onto the plane, his leather shoes tapping gently against the narrow aisle. At 80 years old, each movement was deliberate, careful, like a man who knew both his pace and his purpose. His charcoal gray blazer was worn but dignified, fitting snugly over a crisp white shirt. In his right hand, he carried a small canvas bag, scuffed at the corners, well-traveled, and clutched with quiet importance. He didn't look around. He didn't need to. Row 3A, window seat, business class. He had memorized it months ago when he booked the ticket. Not just any seat, but that seat. The one his wife had always said she wanted to sit in when they finally traveled together as passengers, not professionals. "Someday, Eli," she'd once said, her hand resting gently on his. "I want to fly with you. No cockpit, no control panels. Just you, me, and the clouds out the window." That day never came. Cancer stole it from them. But Elijah was a man who kept promises. He arrived at his row, placing a hand on the seatback for balance. The window seat was there, untouched. The middle seat beside it? Empty. And it would stay that way. That seat wasn't for anyone else. It was hers. He settled in slowly, sighing as he leaned back. Outside the oval window stretched the blue California sky, cloudless and vast. It reminded him of the days he flew, thousands of hours spent above the earth, guiding aircraft through storms and sun alike. But now, he was just a passenger. His fingers brushed the small locket in his blazer pocket. Inside it, a photo of his wife, Marlene, smiling in her nurse's scrubs, taken 35 years ago. He didn't need to open it. He knew every line of that photo by heart. The boarding announcements echoed faintly overhead, but Elijah tuned them out. This flight wasn't just travel, it was remembrance. Then, the calm was broken. "Excuse me, sir?" Elijah looked up. A tall blonde woman stood before him. Her hair was pulled tightly into a bun, and her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. Her uniform was perfectly pressed, the name tag reading R. Dalton. Her tone was sweet, too sweet, the kind that made your instincts twitch. "Yes?" Elijah replied politely. "I'm so sorry to bother you, but we have a bit of a seating issue. There's a guest who really prefers a window seat, and..." She gestured vaguely. Well, she's one of our platinum-tier passengers. Would you mind switching to 3C so she can sit here instead?" Elijah blinked. "I'm sorry. This is the seat I reserved." "Yes, of course. I understand," Rachel said, her smile tightening. "But, you see, the other guest is a very important client. She's quite insistent." He looked at her calmly. "Ma'am, I booked this seat 3 months ago. It's important to me. I'm not trying to be difficult, but I prefer to stay where I am." Rachel's smile disappeared for just a moment, quick, like a glitch in a screen. Then it was back, even more strained than before. "Of course, it's just, this passenger is an influencer with over 10 million followers," she said, as if that explained everything. "She shares everything on social media and, well, having her happy with our service is important for the airline." Elijah didn't flinch. "I see, but I'm afraid I'll still need to stay here." The air around them thickened. Rachel's smile was now paper-thin, her hands clasped too tightly in front of her. From behind her, a young white woman in designer sunglasses and athleisure leaned into the aisle, arms folded, her expression expectant. The scent of expensive perfume wafted forward, aggressive and floral. "That him?" she asked, loud enough for half the cabin to hear. Yes, Rachel replied over her shoulder. Then, turning back to Elijah, she added in a softer voice, "Sir, please, this is just a seat." Elijah looked past her, out the window for a moment, then back. His voice was low, calm. "To you, maybe, but not to me." A few passengers nearby began to stir, sensing tension. One man muttered under his breath. Another woman shifted uncomfortably. Rachel drew a deep breath, then smiled again. This time, something colder. "Sir, I really need your cooperation." "I understand," Elijah said simply, "but the answer is no." Something in her posture stiffened. Rachel straightened, her hands now on her hips. "Well then," she said, tone shifting, "I'll see what I can do." She turned and walked back down the aisle, heels clicking sharply. Elijah exhaled slowly, returning his gaze to the window. The sky hadn't changed, but the air inside the plane had. A minute later, Rachel returned, this time without a smile. The influencer stood behind her, arms still crossed. "I'm sorry, sir," Rachel said, voice firm now, "but I'm going to have to insist. This seat needs to be made available." Elijah looked up, still composed. "I paid for this seat. I have the reservation confirmation. Would you like to see it?" Rachel didn't respond to that. Instead, she stepped forward, reached down, and without warning, grabbed Elijah's canvas bag from under the seat. "Hey," Elijah began, but she had already yanked it out and placed it in the aisle. "There's no need for a scene," she said. The influencer rolled her eyes. "God, just let me sit. This is ridiculous." Elijah stood slowly, using the armrest for support. "Please put my bag back," he said quietly. Rachel's lips curled slightly. "Only if you agree to move." "No." The single word dropped like a pin in a silent room. Passengers nearby were now watching openly. A businessman across the aisle lowered his newspaper. A teenager raised his phone, the screen glowing red. Recording. Rachel straightened. "Then I'll have to escalate this. You're causing a delay, and we cannot accommodate disruptions at this time." "I haven't raised my voice," Elijah replied. "I haven't moved. I've only asked to stay in the seat I reserved." "Sir, you are delaying the flight." "No," he said. "You are." Rachel stood at the front of the cabin, one hand gripping the intercom handset, the other still clenched from her encounter with Elijah Brooks. Her face was flush, not from embarrassment, but from irritation. How dare he, an old man, clearly out of touch, refuse a direct request from crew? Passengers stirred uneasily. The atmosphere in the business class section had shifted from quiet anticipation to palpable discomfort. Everyone could sense the storm forming, but no one spoke. Not yet. Back in row 3A, Elijah sat quietly, his bag now lying awkwardly in the aisle where Rachel had tossed it. He hadn't picked it up. Something about the act, so casual, so dismissive, made it feel like a message. And he had received it loud and clear. His hand rested on the armrest, fingers tapping once, then twice. No words, no reaction. Just the soft rhythm of quiet endurance. He was used to this. Different setting, same battle. Rachel returned with a new edge in her step, striding down the aisle like she owned it. She knelt beside Elijah, her voice just loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. "Mr. Brooks," she said, pronouncing his name like it tasted wrong. "You are currently in violation of FAA boarding policy by obstructing staff direction. That is grounds for removal." He didn't even blink. "I'm not obstructing. I'm sitting in the seat I paid for," he replied, voice low and composed. Rachel leaned in slightly, her breath sharp with peppermint and condescension. "This isn't about a seat anymore, sir. This is about your attitude." Still, he didn't rise to it. That made her angrier. "And let me remind you," she added, standing up and raising her voice just slightly, "this is America. We have rules here, and if you don't want to follow them," she left the sentence hanging, letting implication fill the space. Several heads turned. A couple nearby passengers exchanged glances. One woman, perhaps in her 40s, mouthed, "Wow." Rachel walked to the front again and picked up the intercom. Her voice came through the cabin speakers, artificial and cutting. "Ladies and gentlemen, we apologize for the delay in departure. We are currently addressing a passenger-related issue that is preventing us from pushing back from the gate." Elijah's shoulders tensed, but his face remained still. Rachel continued, "To clarify, the delay is due to one passenger refusing to cooperate with crew instructions. That individual is Mr. Elijah Brooks, seated in 3A. Mr. Brooks is 80 years old and has been asked multiple times to switch seats to accommodate a priority passenger. He is unwilling." The words hung in the air like smoke, acrid and thick. There was a pause, then murmurs, soft at first, disjointed. "Why won't he just move? Seriously, he's 80, what's the big deal? I just want to get home." One man across the aisle leaned over and muttered, "These older folks think the world owes them something." Elijah heard it all. Every word, every sigh, every judgment. He slowly bent forward, retrieved his bag from the floor, and gently placed it back beneath his seat. The movement was mechanical, rehearsed, like muscle memory taking over when the heart couldn't keep up. His eyes locked on the window again, though now the sky outside looked hazy, blurred. He wasn't sure if it was fog or just the sting behind his eyes. "This is America." Rachel's words echoed louder than the engine hum, as if he didn't know where he was, as if the color of his skin somehow rendered him unqualified to belong here. He wasn't new to humiliation, but he had never expected it to feel this raw, not after everything he'd done, everything he'd given. He had always believed that dignity, once earned, could not be taken. But here, today, it was being chipped away in front of strangers with every breath he took. A few rows back, the influencer, still standing, pulled down her designer sunglasses and whispered to Rachel, "He's seriously ruining my day. Can't you just get security?" Rachel glanced around theatrically, letting the idea float through the cabin like a threat. Elijah remained silent. Then came the final blow. Rachel picked up the intercom again. Her voice, now perfectly poised, rang through the plane. "For those concerned about the delay, please know we are taking appropriate action. Our staff will escalate to gate authorities if necessary. Again, the passenger in question is Mr. Elijah Brooks, age 80. We appreciate your patience as we resolve this matter." The name repeated, the age, as if he were a criminal, as if he had committed some act of violence, some unforgivable sin, rather than simply wanting to sit where he had once promised his wife they would sit together. Elijah closed his eyes. Not in surrender, but in restraint. Around him, whispers bloomed like wildfire. "He's so selfish. Is this really happening? Just move, man." No one asked why he was there. No one wondered what the seat meant to him. They only saw a delay, a disruption, a problem. And in that moment, Elijah knew something that twisted deeper than any insult ever could. They didn't see him. Not the years he spent in service to an industry that now disrespected him. Not the lives he helped save from the quiet corner of a back office in Washington. Not the countless hours in simulators, reviewing crash data, drafting safety protocols that others would take credit for. They saw only an old black man in the wrong place at the wrong time. Rachel walked past him again, this time without even looking. The influencer took out her phone, positioned it subtly, and began recording. Elijah stayed still. The only thing he moved was his hand, reaching up to gently press against the inside of his blazer, feeling the locket, the weight of memory, the reason he was here. "Marlene, baby, I'm trying." He felt the tears coming, but they didn't fall. Not yet. Not while strangers watched. Not while the world believed he had no voice. Liam adjusted his headphones, but the music had long since stopped. He hadn't played a single note since the first raised voice reached his ears. Now, with his phone angled discreetly at chest height, camera on, he was capturing everything. He was only 22, traveling alone for a tech internship interview in San Diego. Window seat, row 6, just 3 rows behind the commotion. At first, he'd tried to tune it out like everyone else, Just another delay. Probably someone drunk or confused. But something about the way the old man sat there, quiet and still, reminded Liam of his grandfather. And something about the flight attendant's tone made the hair on the back of his neck stand up. So, he started filming. Elijah didn't know he was being recorded. He sat frozen, both hands clenched around the handle of his canvas bag, his back hunched slightly forward as if bracing for impact. Every muscle in his frame was rigid. His eye, dimmed by age and fatigue, stared at the wall ahead, unseeing, like a man waiting for the storm to pass. Then it happened. From across the aisle, a heavy-set businessman in a navy blazer scoffed loudly. "What's the hold-up now? Still that guy?" Rachel, standing near the galley, turned and nodded subtly. "He's refusing to move." Still, the man shook his head, deliberately louder now. "Ridiculous. Just another entitled old-timer. Probably thinks the world owes him a damn monument." Someone behind him chuckled, and then it came. The sting. "He's just a useless old man," a younger voice said. "Probably doesn't even know where he is." Elijah flinched. He didn't cry. He didn't speak. He just sat there, shaking slightly, lips pressed into a hard line. His fingers clutched the fabric of his bag as if it were an anchor, as if letting go might cause him to drift away entirely. Liam felt a surge of something he hadn't expected. Anger. Not loud, raging anger. A cold, deep burn that started in his gut and traveled to his chest. He knew what it felt like to be humiliated in public. He knew how people judged without knowing. But this was cruelty wrapped in convenience. The easy way out. Blame the one who can't fight back. Across the aisle, an elderly woman stood. Her silver hair was pulled into a neat bun, and her hands trembled slightly as she steadied herself against the seat. She looked to be in her 70s, wearing a soft lavender cardigan and orthopedic shoes. "I'd like to say something," she said, her voice clear and unwavering despite her frame. Rachel turned. Her professional mask slipped for just a second. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to sit down." "No," the woman replied. "Not until I say what needs to be said." Passengers leaned closer. The murmurs faded. "That man," she pointed gently at Elijah, "has been sitting there quietly. He hasn't shouted, he hasn't caused harm, and yet he's being treated like a criminal." Rachel's jaw tightened. "Ma'am, I'm asking you." "He deserves respect," the woman continued. "He's old enough to be your father, maybe your grandfather, and you've humiliated him in front of strangers for what? A window seat? A photo opportunity?" Rachel's cheeks flushed. "If you do not sit down, I'll be forced to call airport security." The words dropped like a hammer. The older woman stared at her. For a moment, it seemed she might resist. But then she sighed, heavily, and returned to her seat, her dignity intact, even if her voice had been silenced. Liam kept filming, every second of it. He zoomed in on Elijah's face. The man hadn't even looked up. It was like he'd left the cabin entirely, retreating to some safer place inside himself. Liam wondered what that place looked like, if it was peaceful, or if it too had been stained by years of similar wounds. Rachel turned to the influencer, who was now dramatically sighing while texting on her phone. "I'll handle it," she muttered. She walked briskly toward the front of the cabin again, no doubt preparing another announcement. Liam turned off the video, saving the footage. He scrolled through the gallery, 6 separate clips so far, each capturing a moment more damning than the last. He could post it. Right now. Tag the airline. Let the world see. But something held him back. Not fear, respect. He wanted to talk to the man first. Ask him what he wanted. This wasn't just about outrage. It was about truth. And Liam didn't want to hijack someone else's pain for likes. He glanced toward Elijah again. The man's shoulders had dropped slightly. Not in relief. In resignation. The kind that comes when you stop expecting the world to be fair. Liam whispered to himself. Not today. He leaned forward in his seat, mind already formulating a plan. The old woman's voice still echoed in his ears. The shame in the cabin hung heavy like smoke, and the silence that followed her reprimand was deafening. But Liam wasn't afraid of silence. He was afraid of what would happen if no one broke it. Elijah's grip tightened around the handle of his canvas bag. Fingers knotted with the tension of a man trying to remain composed. The sting of humiliation still echoed in his ears. The announcement, the whispers, the casual cruelty. But it wasn't just today. No, today was only a reminder, a cruel déjà vu. The silence around him became a tunnel, stretching and folding into memory. The year was 1987. Elijah Brooks stood inside a stark, humming FAA control room, surrounded by blinking lights, data printouts, and the low murmur of engineers arguing over calculations. He was younger then, sharper, leaner, but already marked by the same quiet intensity. At that time, he wasn't just another black engineer, though many assumed he was. He was the lead investigator of one of the most dangerous safety failures in modern aviation, a latent fault in autopilot firmware that nearly caused 3 commercial crashes in under 6 months. 3 near deaths, thousands of potential lives, 1 fix, and Elijah had been the one to find it. He didn't chase recognition, he didn't do press, but inside those confidential rooms, surrounded by bureaucrats and skeptics, his voice had carried weight. He remembered the moment clearly, presenting his findings before a room of mostly white older men, all twice his pay grade. He had expected resistance. What he got was silence. Then, the head of engineering at Boeing leaned back and said, "Damn, he's right." From that moment forward, Elijah had been a name whispered in reverence behind closed doors. The man who saw what others didn't. His wife, Marlene, was waiting when he got home that night. Still in her nurse's scrubs, hair pulled back, soup on the stove. She had smiled at him, not like a hero, but like a man returning from battle. "What happened?" she asked, knowing something had. He chuckled then. "I think I saved a few million people today." Marlene had walked over, placed her hands on his cheeks, and kissed his forehead. "Then you better sleep like it." It had been her voice, her warmth, that kept him centered all these years. And one phrase above all: when they look down on you, you look up, always. Back in the cabin, Elijah opened his eyes again. He felt the pocket of his blazer, fingers brushing against the aged leather of his passport. A bit worn at the corners, but inside it, tucked within the folds, was something most would overlook. A laminated FAA Distinguished Service ID, decades old, barely legible now, with his full name, his rank, and his contribution. It had been awarded quietly, no ceremony, no applause, but it had meant the world to him. Suddenly, a shadow passed in front of him. Rachel. She leaned in, her smile no longer even an attempt at friendly. "Mr. Brooks, may I see your passport, please?" He looked up at her. "Why?" "For documentation," she said smoothly. "If we have to remove you from the plane, we need a record." Her words were clean, sanitized, but he could feel the acid underneath. He hesitated, then slowly reached into his pocket, pulled the passport out, and handed it to her. Their fingers didn't touch. Rachel turned on her heel and walked toward the galley, flipping through the pages without care. She stopped suddenly, frowning. Inside the back flap, the FAA ID card slipped out and fluttered to the floor. She picked it up, glanced at it briefly. "Looks old," she muttered, before tossing it back into the passport and sliding both onto the counter beside her iced coffee. She hadn't read it. Not really. The small print, the title, the emblem, all lost on her. She had no idea what she held in her hands. Liam, still watching, caught the detail, the card slipping, the way she ignored it. He squinted, then subtly lifted his phone and zoomed in from a distance. A seal. Some kind of federal badge? Something was off. Something important. Meanwhile, Elijah sat in silence, unaware that a piece of his life, his legacy, was now lying face down next to a melting drink and a crumpled napkin. He wasn't surprised. This wasn't the first time someone dismissed what he carried. It likely wouldn't be the last. But what pierced him wasn't anger. It was the realization that, in that moment, the truth was inches away from being known, and yet entirely invisible. He thought again of Marlene, of the night she died. She'd been in hospice for 3 weeks, her body failing, but her mind sharp. She had held his hand, whispering with dry lips, "Promise me you'll go. That flight, that seat. Sit by the window like we planned." And he had nodded, choking back the grief. That promise had brought him here. Not fame, not ego, just love, just memory. And now, as he sat here being ridiculed, belittled, erased, he knew she was watching to see if he would stand up or shrink. So he sat taller, not defiant, not confrontational, just true and somewhere, just beyond the clouds. Marlene was smiling. The air inside the cabin had turned cold, not by temperature, but by tone. A stifling chill of judgment, heavy and collective, drifted through the aisle like invisible smoke. Elijah Brooks sat motionless in seat 3A, unaware of the exact second the mood shifted, but keenly feeling its presence. Rachel, standing confidently at the front of the cabin, adjusted the intercom mic once more. Her voice, no longer tinged with restraint, poured into the speakers with clinical calm. "Ladies and gentlemen, once again, we apologize for the delay. Unfortunately, we are unable to begin pushback due to a passenger who is refusing to comply with flight crew instructions. The individual is Mr. Elijah Brooks, seated in 3A. A sharp intake of breath moved through the rows like dominoes falling. Rachel continued. Mr. Brooks, age 80, has been asked repeatedly to cooperate in changing seats to accommodate another guest's request. He continues to refuse. We are working with the gate to resolve the situation as quickly as possible. Thank you for your patience. The intercom clicked off. The silence that followed wasn't silence at all. It was judgment, unfiltered, free-flowing. "Are you kidding me?" someone hissed. "This guy's holding us up? Really?" From 3 rows back, a woman leaned over to her husband. "It's always some stubborn old person. Can't let go of control." A younger man muttered, "Entitled much? He's 80. Just sit wherever, man." Elijah didn't move. He felt each word land like a stone. He had once sat in front of Congress, calmly testifying about systemic failures in aircraft training. He had been awarded quietly by 3 different administrations. He had mentored dozens of young engineers, many of whom now sat in offices with more power than he ever held. But here, in this flying microcosm of modern America, he was just a problem, just an old black man in the wrong seat. His hands were trembling now, though he tried to still them. He placed one atop the other, locking them tight in his lap. His breathing grew shallower, eyes fixed on the seat ahead. He couldn't look up, couldn't meet their stares, because he could feel them. Every one. The businessman from earlier cleared his throat, loud, on purpose. "If he doesn't want to be here, I'll help him off myself." A woman nearby chuckled. "Don't give him a heart attack." Someone behind him whispered, "Probably doesn't even know what day it is." They laughed. Elijah closed his eyes. His body felt small, not because of age, but because of shame. Uninvited, unjustified. But no less suffocating. This wasn't about a seat anymore. It hadn't been for some time. It was about being erased, publicly, 1 inch at a time. He thought of Marlene, of her hand on his shoulder, of her whisper, "You hold your head high, Eli, no matter what." But what if he couldn't? What if today, just this once, he couldn't hold anything up? He felt it then, a burn behind his eyes, not hot, not angry, cold, grief. He hadn't cried when she died. He had sat beside her hospital bed, holding her hand until the warmth faded, and told her he would be okay, that he would do the flight, that he would sit by the window and carry her with him. But now, he wasn't sure he could keep that promise. A passenger across the aisle pulled out their phone and began filming, boldly. without shame. Elijah didn't notice. His vision was starting to blur anyway. Rachel stood beside the forward galley now, arms folded, looking pleased with herself. She had made her point. She had asserted control, and everyone had backed her. A low rumble of conversation filled the cabin now. No one cared about the truth, only the inconvenience. Elijah's hand slipped from his lap and landed lightly on the armrests. He leaned forward, slowly, like an ancient tree bent by wind. His breathing hitched. His fingers touched the locket again. He pressed it tight to his chest. "I'm sorry, Marlene." The first tear fell, silently, quickly, leaving a glistening trail down his cheek. And then another. He didn't wipe them. He didn't flinch. They were not cries of anger, not protest, not pity. They were the tears of a man who had tried, one last time, to believe in kindness, and found none. He slumped forward. The cabin grew quieter. Liam, watching from row 6, saw it happen in real time. The man's body folding, the shoulders curling inward, the head bowing not in sleep, but in defeat. And no one moved. No one helped. Because no one thought it was their job. Elijah sat, now only a shell of the man who had walked on proudly 15 minutes earlier. Once an architect of flight safety, now a cautionary tale of modern cruelty. The moment stretched. Passengers grew restless, muttering about timing, about schedules, about everything but the man suffering 2 feet away. Rachel glanced at her watch, already composing her next announcement. But something was shifting, something quiet, unseen. It started in the eyes of one young man with headphones, still recording, and it would grow. But for now, Elijah Brooks sat alone in row 3A, the weight of a lifetime pressing down on his spine. And for the first time since he was a child, he felt small enough to disappear. The hush in the cabin was deafening, an oppressive silence wrapped in collective discomfort. Elijah remained hunched forward in his seat, his shoulders still trembling faintly, the lines of age and anguish etched deeper with every breath. And then, like the clean snap of a dry branch in a still forest, a voice rang out. "That's enough!" Heads turned. Liam stood, his phone gripped tightly in his hand. His face was pale, but his jaw was set, and his voice, though young, carried with it a steel that no one expected. Everyone stopped. "I've been recording this entire time," he said louder, his voice projecting over the rows. "I have everything, every word, every action." Rachel turned, stunned. "Excuse me?" "I have video proof," Liam continued, stepping into the aisle. "That he never raised his voice, that he was polite, that you humiliated him in front of this whole plane. You lied over the intercom." Rachel's cheeks flushed, and for a brief second, she hesitated. Elijah slowly lifted his head, blinking through the film of grief. His gaze locked onto Liam's, confused, then surprised. The influencer in the front row scowled. "This is ridiculous." Rachel stepped forward, her voice tight and rehearsed. "Sir, sit down. You are interfering with crew operations, and that's a federal offense." "No," Liam said, not moving. "You don't get to hide behind protocol when you've abused it." There was an audible shift in the cabin. A weight had lifted. The dam had cracked. A woman in 4C whispered, "Did she really lie?" A man behind Liam asked, "He has a video?" Rachel's eyes flicked toward the cockpit, gauging how far this had spiraled. "I'm warning you," she said, her voice rising. "You're endangering this flight." "I'm protecting the truth," Liam shot back. Then, softer to Elijah, "Sir, are you okay?" Elijah didn't answer immediately. He just looked at the young man, the stranger, standing in defense of his dignity. A spark flickered in his eyes, a flicker that had been lost just minutes ago. Liam turned back to the cabin. "This man isn't causing trouble. He's sitting in the seat he paid for, and she's trying to throw him off the plane." Rachel took a step forward. "You don't know the full story. You're right, Liam interrupted. But I know mine. He raised his phone. The screen was paused on a still image of Rachel yanking Elijah's bag from beneath the seat. My dad worked for the FAA, died when I was 15. He used to talk about the people who changed the industry. Not the ones with medals or news stories, but the quiet ones. The ones who saved lives without anyone knowing. Liam's voice cracked slightly, but he didn't stop. He had a name he mentioned more than once. A man who fixed a system error back in the 80s, who stopped a string of crashes before they happened. Said he was the smartest guy in the room, but always listened like he wasn't. He turned to Elijah. I never thought I'd meet him. The cabin was utterly still. Sir, Liam said, softer now. Is your name Elijah Brooks? Elijah nodded, slowly, like the motion itself carried weight. Liam's chest rose and fell. Then, you saved my dad. A gasp rippled through the rows. Rachel's face drained of color. Elijah blinked. His lips parted slightly, the realization settling in like a soft blanket over raw skin. Liam turned to the rest of the cabin. So, if anyone here still thinks he doesn't belong in that seat, you might want to ask yourselves what flying would look like today without him. A full beat of silence passed. Then another. Then murmurs. This time not of mockery or complaint, but disbelief, regret. I had no idea. Did he really say his dad worked with him? A man near the front cleared his throat, visibly uncomfortable. Rachel was frozen in place. Give me my passport, Elijah said suddenly, his voice hoarse but steady. Rachel flinched, caught off guard. I believe, Elijah added. You still have it. Rachel turned and reached for the counter, her hands trembling now. She retrieved the passport and the laminated card still tucked inside, holding them like they were burning her fingers. Elijah stood slowly, his knees stiff. He extended a hand. She placed the items in his palm without a word. He opened the passport, pulled out the FAA Distinguished Service ID, and handed it to Liam. Liam read the faded text, the signature, the embossed seal. Distinguished Service Award for Lifetime Contributions to Aviation Safety, Elijah M. Brooks. Liam looked up. You really are him. I was, Elijah said. Once. Liam shook his head. You still are. A round of spontaneous applause broke out in the back of the cabin. Not loud, not dramatic, but honest. And it spread. Elijah didn't smile, but his eyes shone. Not with pride, but with relief. With the quiet, fragile affirmation that maybe, just maybe, the world hadn't forgotten after all. Rachel stood stiff, unsure whether to flee or fight. You're done, someone said behind her. Passengers had turned. A middle-aged man in 2A leaned into the aisle. We're not flying anywhere with her on board. A murmur of agreement. Rachel opened her mouth, but no words came out. The cockpit door opened. Captain John Mitchell stepped out, his expression unreadable. He looked at Rachel, then at Liam, then at Elijah. What's going on here? He asked. Liam stepped forward, holding up the ID. Captain, I think you should see this. John took the card. His eyes scanned the text. When he read the name, something in his expression cracked. His mouth opened slightly. A pause. Then he looked up, directly at Elijah. Sir, is this... are you... Elijah nodded, weary. Captain Mitchell stared for a moment longer. Then, with the professionalism of a man trained to fly through storms, he nodded slowly and said, Understood. He turned to Rachel. Come with me. Her face collapsed, but she obeyed. As the cockpit door closed behind them, Elijah lowered himself gently back into 3A. Liam leaned down beside him. Thank you, he whispered. Elijah replied softly, No, son, thank you. And for the first time in hours, the cabin finally exhaled. Captain John Mitchell stood just inside the cockpit doorway, his uniform sharp, his posture composed, but his eyes locked on one thing only, the laminated card in his hand. It was faded, creased along the edges, with old ink and an emblem that looked like it had seen 1,000 desks and twice as many hands. But it was unmistakable to anyone who had ever trained, studied, or worked in the American aviation system. FAA Distinguished Service, Elijah M. Brooks. He read it again, slower this time, and with it, something clicked. Elijah Brooks, he repeated under his breath, then raised his head toward the elderly man now seated in 3A, shoulders still tense, face carved by years of resilience. No, it can't be. The cabin was quiet, every passenger leaning in ever so slightly. Elijah lifted his eyes, meeting the captain's stare with calm weariness. "It's been a long time," he said. John stepped into the aisle, card still in hand. "Sir, did you ever teach at the National Aviation Safety Institute in Virginia?" Elijah gave a faint nod. "I did. A long time ago." A slow, stunned breath escaped John's lips. He took 2 more steps forward, like a man walking through a memory. "I was in your systems diagnostics course 31 years ago. You were a guest instructor for our simulation failure protocols class." A ripple of recognition passed over Elijah's face. Not of the individual, but of the moment. "You were the tall kid who kept asking about triple redundancies in low-pressure systems," Elijah said, a faint glint of humor in his eye. John's eyes widened. "You remember that?" Elijah nodded, his voice low but steady. "You were stubborn. That was good." The cabin was still, as if time had slowed around them. John turned to the rest of the passengers, voice now loud enough for the full cabin to hear. "Ladies and gentlemen, I need to say something." He paused. "I don't normally speak outside the cockpit unless absolutely necessary, but I want every person on this flight to know that the man sitting in seat 3A is a pioneer in our industry. He's not just a passenger. He's the reason many of us are here." He held up the ID. 30 years ago, I was a student. This man taught me how to troubleshoot emergency failures, lessons I've used more than once in the air, lessons that have saved lives." There was an audible inhale across the rows. John continued. "He worked behind the scenes, fixing problems before anyone else even saw them. He helped redesign safety protocols after one of the worst near-miss incidents in aviation history. No medals, no media, but every flight you've ever taken has passed through a system he helped shape." Rachel, standing beside the cockpit door, looked like she had been drained of color. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. John turned to her now, his voice colder. "And you humiliated him." "Captain, No," he said, holding up a hand. Not another word. He looked back at Elijah, and what he did next made the entire plane hold its breath. He straightened his back, raised his right hand to the edge of his cap, and delivered a formal military-grade salute. Not theatrical, not symbolic, precise, earned. "For your service, sir," he said, voice soft but firm. "To the industry, to every pilot who came after, and to every soul who made it home because of your work." Elijah blinked, and for a moment, the weight in his chest shifted. Not gone, but lifted enough for air to return. "I was just doing my job," he replied quietly. "No," John said. "You did more than that. You made this sky safer." The first clap started in the back, a hesitant rhythm. Then it grew. One by one, the passengers began applauding, not loudly, not with fanfare, but with reverence. It wasn't for a viral moment. It wasn't because of the drama. It was because they now saw what had been invisible moments before. Elijah Brooks had once saved strangers' lives, and today, strangers returned the favor. Liam watched from his row, pride swelling in his chest. He felt his father in that moment, heard his voice in the back of his mind, telling stories about the quiet ones. Captain Mitchell stepped closer to Rachel, who stood frozen, mouth slightly agape. "You will remain in the galley," he said. "Gate security will escort you once we return. You are no longer part of this flight crew." The words landed like steel. Rachel didn't argue. John turned back to the passengers. Thank you for your patience. We'll be returning to the gate momentarily for a crew adjustment. I promise, it won't be a long delay." He nodded once more to Elijah and began walking back to the cockpit. As he passed Liam, he paused. "Thank you, son." Liam looked up. "Just trying to do what was right." The captain smiled. "Sometimes, that's everything." And with that, the door closed. Elijah sat quietly in his seat, the faint sound of clapping still echoing behind him. He didn't smile, but in the corner of his eye, just near the edge, one last tear slipped down. But this one wasn't for sorrow. It was for being seen. Captain John Mitchell re-entered the cabin with a purpose in his stride. The moment of respectful recognition had passed, but something gnawed at the back of his mind. A loose thread left dangling, a detail unresolved. He wasn't just a pilot anymore. He was a man who had just saluted a legend. And something about that legend stirred a memory far deeper than just a classroom lesson. He approached Rachel, who stood stiff and pale near the galley, avoiding eye contact. Her shoulders were tense, jaw locked. But her confidence had evaporated, replaced with a tight, barely held together defensiveness. "Ms. Dalton," John said evenly, "you have something that belongs to Mr. Brooks." Rachel blinked. "I gave him back his passport." "The card, the one inside, the laminated one." I thought it was just a note or something old," she said, fumbling. "I didn't really look." John's eyes narrowed. "You didn't look?" There was no hiding behind policy now, no script. She reached into the small tray where the discarded items still lay. Napkins, a receipt, a pen, and retrieved the worn card. She handed it to him without a word. John turned it over in his hand. He recognized the FAA seal immediately. It wasn't just any badge or ID. It was a Federal Aviation Administration Distinguished Honor Medal, laminated for preservation and issued only to a handful of individuals in the agency's history. Below the embossed crest was the name Elijah M. Brooks, Lifetime Contributions to International Aviation Safety, 1991. His breath caught. He stared at the date, blinking as realization broke through memory. He knew that year. Everyone in the aviation world did. But to John, it meant something personal. He turned and walked back down the aisle, past watching passengers, his face unreadable. When he reached Elijah's row, he didn't speak right away. He simply sat in the empty middle seat beside him, holding the card with reverence. "I need to ask you something," he said softly. Elijah looked up, weary but present. "Go ahead." John held out the card. "Is this what I think it is?" Elijah took a breath. "It was given to me after the 1991 Phoenix Protocol collapse." John nodded. "You were on that team?" "I led it," Elijah replied. "The foreign navigation update had a flaw, one that didn't show up in US tests but triggered in transatlantic conditions. It wasn't caught in time. One flight almost went down over the Atlantic. They grounded 500 planes until we could isolate it." "I remember that," John whispered. "I was 8. My dad, he was supposed to be on flight 245 the night they grounded everything. He cursed the delay, said it ruined his schedule." Elijah tilted his head. And they later found out that if that plane had taken off with that software error, it would have lost navigation within 45 minutes. Elijah nodded. "It would have." John stared at him. "My dad lived another 20 years, he said. He taught me how to fly, how to think, everything." He paused, emotion rising in his throat. "And you saved him, without ever knowing." For a long moment, there was only the hum of the plane, still motionless on the tarmac. Elijah looked down, then back up. "That's the thing about this work," he said. "You save people you'll never meet. Sometimes, they don't even know they needed saving." John let out a quiet laugh, one that carried both disbelief and deep gratitude. "You know what he used to say? The real heroes are the ones who never raise their voice and never ask to be thanked." Elijah's lips curled into the faintest smile. "Then your father was a smart man." John stood up, walked to the intercom, and pressed the button. "Ladies and gentlemen, I need to address you one more time." The cabin fell into silence again. "I'd like to share something that many of you don't know. Earlier today, you met Mr. Elijah Brooks. Some of you may have heard what he was called over this system: non-compliant, the cause of delay. But what you didn't hear was what he did in 1991. He paused. Mr. Brooks led a multinational investigation that identified a fatal software flaw in our aircraft systems. A flaw that, if left uncorrected, would have resulted in catastrophic failure on hundreds of flights. One of those flights was the one my father was scheduled to board. There were gasps, audible murmurs of realization. I would not be standing here today if not for him." He turned to Elijah. "And neither would many of us." Elijah shifted uncomfortably, not used to attention. John held up the card. "This is the FAA's highest honor. It's not something you buy or request or lobby for. It's awarded for saving lives." He turned back to the passengers. "So the next time you see an old man sitting quietly in a seat he booked months ago, maybe, just maybe, you'll ask yourself if he's already given more to the world than most of us ever will." The intercom clicked off. Silence. Then a voice. "God bless you, sir." Another. "Thank you." A third. "I'm so sorry." And then applause again. Not just polite, but sustained. A wave that rolled from front to back and back again. Rachel, still standing by the cockpit, looked like she wanted to vanish. John approached her one final time. "Return to the gate. Hand in your badge when we land. This flight continues without you." She nodded, too stunned to speak. Back at 3A, Elijah closed his eyes. He wasn't thinking about applause. He was thinking about a night in 1991, sitting alone in a windowless FAA room, eating vending machine peanuts and running diagnostic lines. He'd wondered then if it even mattered. Today, he had his answer. The aircraft remained grounded at the gate, but inside, the air had changed. No longer filled with tension or judgment, it now buzzed with energy, a shift brought on by truth finally surfacing. Captain John Mitchell stood beside Rachel in the front galley, posture firm, eyes steady. "You're no longer part of this flight," he repeated. Rachel didn't argue. Her lips were pressed tightly together, her cheeks blotched red with humiliation. She clutched her ID badge like a life fist, but it was slipping fast. I didn't know who he was," she stammered under her breath. "That's the problem," John replied. "You didn't need to know. You should have respected him anyway." Her eyes flickered to Elijah, who sat quietly in 3A, eyes forward, hands resting on his knees. Not gloating, not smiling, just still. A flight operations supervisor boarded through the forward door, clipboard in hand, headset still looped around his neck. "We got the captain's report," he said. "She's being relieved of duty for the remainder of the flight." The man's tone was businesslike, but his glance toward Rachel carried judgment. Rachel opened her mouth, perhaps to protest, then closed it. She placed her badge and FAA crew ID onto the clipboard with a faint clack, hands trembling. The supervisor scribbled a quick note. "You'll be contacted by corporate." Passengers craned their necks to watch as Rachel stepped toward the exit, her shoulders slightly hunched. The influencer, still seated in 2A, let out a small, exasperated scoff. Rachel paused, turned to John one last time and said quietly, "You don't understand. My dad's the regional director. This will get messy." John's face didn't move. "I know exactly who your father is," he replied. "Which is why this will be handled cleanly." Rachel's eyes narrowed. "You wouldn't even be in this cockpit if he hadn't cleared your promotion." John blinked. "And he'll understand why I'm still choosing to do the right thing." She exhaled through her nose, head turning sharply toward the door. "You just embarrassed the wrong family, Captain." "No," he said, stepping aside. "You did." Rachel stepped off the aircraft. The door closed behind her with a soft but satisfying click. There was a collective inhale inside the plane. as if everyone had just witnessed the end of an era. The supervisor approached John again. "What about the VIP guest?" John turned his head toward seat 2A. The influencer hadn't stood up. She'd been scrolling on her phone the whole time, occasionally glancing up as if inconvenienced. He walked toward her, every step echoing with quiet command. "Miss," he said, "I understand you were the one who requested this seat change." She looked up with a smirk. "Yeah, so? Please gather your things." She blinked. "What? You're being removed from this flight." Her jaw dropped. "What the hell? I didn't do anything, I just asked for a better seat." "You escalated the situation. You supported the mistreatment of another passenger, and now you're complicit in a disruption that's delayed hundreds of travelers." "I'm a partnered brand guest with your airline," she said, voice rising. "Do you even know who I am?" John didn't flinch. "I know you're someone who thinks followers make you immune to consequence. They don't." Gasps floated from surrounding passengers. She stood abruptly. "You're going to regret this." "Perhaps," John said, "but not today." The supervisor gestured toward the front. "Let's go, ma'am." She stomped toward the door, heels clicking aggressively. As she passed Elijah's row, she threw him a glare. He didn't return it. She exited the plane. The door sealed again. For a beat, there was only silence. Then John reached for the intercom once more. "Ladies and gentlemen," his voice rang clearly over the speakers, "thank you for your patience during this delay. I want to formally address what you've just witnessed." A few people nodded. Others leaned in. "This morning, a series of inappropriate and discriminatory actions were taken by a member of our crew and another passenger. Those actions resulted in the unjust treatment of Mr. Elijah Brooks, a valued guest on this flight." He paused, allowing the gravity to settle. "We have addressed the situation. The individuals responsible have been removed. This flight will now proceed, with a renewed commitment to respect, professionalism, and accountability." There was a pause. Then John added, "On behalf of the airline, I would like to personally and publicly apologize to Mr. Brooks, not because of who he used to be, but because of the man he is today, a man who deserved better." He released the mic. The applause that followed was louder this time, filled with conviction. Elijah sat motionless for a few seconds. Then, slowly, he dipped his head forward in acknowledgement. Not triumph, not victory, just grace. Back in the cockpit, John took a moment before seating himself. The supervisor returned to the galley, giving the final green light to close the manifest. Elijah remained still, watching the sky beyond the window. Liam leaned in from behind. "They're gone." Elijah gave a small nod. "You okay?" Liam asked. "I'm better," Elijah said softly. "Not because they left, but because you stood up." The younger man looked sheepish. "Felt like the least I could do." "It was more than enough." A pause. "You know," Elijah added, turning slightly, "in all my years working behind closed doors, I never expected anyone to remember, much less defend me." Liam gave a small smile. "Well, your legacy came full circle." As the engines began to whir and the aircraft slowly pulled from the gate, passengers relaxed in their seats. The energy inside was no longer sharp. It was cleansed, renewed. And in seat 3A, Elijah closed his eyes, letting the soft hum of the engines wash over him. He had not raised his voice. He had not fought back with fists or fury, but justice had arrived, on time. The engines hummed softly as the aircraft eased back into its position at the gate. Though the wheels had barely moved, the emotional journey inside had traveled decades. The tension had been replaced with something heavier, deeper, an awareness that what just happened wasn't just personal. It was systemic. Captain John Mitchell stood again at the front of the cabin, his uniform immaculate, his face solemn. He didn't reach for the intercom this time. He wanted his voice to be heard with no static, no filter. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "we've returned to the gate as a formality, but also as a statement. What happened on this flight doesn't end with two people being escorted off. It's bigger than that." He took a breath. 34 years ago, a man named Elijah Brooks identified a catastrophic systems failure that saved lives, including someone very close to me. But today, that same man was disrespected in the most public, humiliating way by the very industry he helped build. The cabin was silent. No murmurs, no shifting, just eyes on John, and eyes on Elijah. What many don't know, John continued, is that after his work with the FAA, Elijah Brooks contributed to the earliest drafts of the Code of Conduct and Passenger Ethics Protocol, the exact guidelines that flight crews are trained on today. Elijah turned slightly, surprised. He hadn't expected that detail to be remembered, much less mentioned. John nodded toward him. Mr. Brooks was only in his 40s then. He believed that safety wasn't just mechanical, it was moral. That how we treat people on board is just as critical as how we fly the plane. A light gasp escaped from a passenger in row 5. John looked toward the rear of the cabin. We've initiated a formal investigation into this incident. Not only the actions of the crew member, but the culture that allowed it to happen. We will be reviewing training, accountability, and internal communication protocols. A few heads nodded in agreement. I've already submitted my report to flight operations, he said, and I've requested that a team be assembled to review our code of ethics, starting with the original version written by Mr. Brooks. Liam, sitting 2 rows behind Elijah, leaned forward and whispered, "You wrote that?" Elijah chuckled quietly, shaking his head. "A long time ago. I didn't think they still used it." "They didn't," John said, overhearing. "It was revised twice, but your original framework is still in the archive. I looked it up this morning after reading your name on that badge. I didn't know then what I know now, but your fingerprints were all over the roots of this place." He turned back to the passengers. "We owe this man more than a seat. We owe him a system that reflects the very values he once built." Applause rose again. Different this time. Not for spectacle, for integrity. Elijah sat still, but something had shifted in him. A quiet warmth, a sense of something returning, not pride, but purpose. The kind that had faded with years of invisibility. One by one, passengers started speaking, not with outrage, but with reflection. "This never should have happened," said a woman in row 7. "I'm ashamed I didn't say something earlier," added a businessman across the aisle. "I fly twice a week. I've seen this kind of thing before. It needs to stop." John nodded. "That's why we're here." The intercom crackled. A voice from ground operations confirmed that crew replacements were inbound. They'd be ready to continue the flight within 20 minutes. John smiled slightly, then turned to Elijah. "Would you mind addressing the cabin?" Elijah blinked. "Me?" "Yes," John said gently. "You started this journey in silence. Maybe it should end with your voice." The cabin collectively turned, waiting. Elijah stood slowly. He didn't need help. Not anymore. He stepped into the aisle, hands clasped behind his back, looking at the faces before him, not as accusers, but as listeners, as fellow travelers. "My name is Elijah Brooks," he began. "I've worked in aviation most of my life. Not where you'd see me. I wasn't a captain. I wasn't on magazine covers. But I was there, in the rooms where decisions were made. Quiet rooms. Heavy ones." He paused, scanning the crowd. "I never asked to be remembered. Most of us don't. We just want to build something that lasts. Something safer. Something better." His voice softened. "I wrote part of the ethics policy this airline still uses today. I believe that dignity should be in every seat, not just first class. That everyone deserves to feel safe, not just in the air, but in the way they're treated." More than a few passengers wiped their eyes. What happened today hurt, I won't lie. But it also reminded me why I started in this work to begin with. Because the sky is only free if we treat each other like we all belong in it. He nodded once, then sat. Silence. Then, standing ovation. No cheers, no whistles. Just the sound of dozens of people rising to their feet in quiet acknowledgement. Elijah sat back, breath steady. John returned to the cockpit. Liam leaned forward again. "You ever think about writing a book?" Elijah smiled faintly. "No, but maybe now I will." The cabin had settled into a respectful silence once again. No longer the strained hush of tension or uncertainty. This was different. This silence was earned. It was the kind that followed truth, revelation, and a shared sense that something sacred had just happened. A course had been corrected, not just for one man, but for everyone aboard. As the new crew settled in and the final pre-flight checks began, Captain John Mitchell stepped out of the cockpit once more, but this time, he didn't speak into the intercom. He walked directly to row 3A. "Elijah," he said quietly, "would you care to join me in the cockpit?" There was a murmur across the rows. Liam's eyebrows lifted, a smile creeping across his face. Elijah blinked. "Are you serious?" John grinned. "I wouldn't ask twice." The older man stood slowly, nodding. His knees ached, but something inside him moved smoother now, like an old engine rediscovering its rhythm. As he followed John down the aisle, a few passengers leaned back to let him pass. A hand rested briefly on his shoulder. A whisper, "Thank you again." He entered the cockpit, compact, glowing with soft amber lights, the heart of the aircraft humming like a sleeping beast. Everything was familiar, yet somehow foreign. It had been decades since Elijah had sat this close to a flight panel. John gestured toward the co-pilot's seat. "Have a seat, sir." Elijah lowered himself slowly, eyes taking in the layout. Screens, levers, switches. All evolved, all new, but the soul of the cockpit was the same. "It's beautiful," Elijah said, voice barely above a whisper. "More screens now, but the bones are still here." John sat beside him. "She's a good bird." 787 Dreamliner. Elijah nodded. "Never flew one myself. I left before these came out." John smiled. "But your fingerprints are in here too. Safety protocols, warning systems, that proximity alert, that's your team's work from '89. Elijah looked ahead at the empty runway. "We never know where the work ends up." A pause settled between them. Then John asked, "You ever miss it?" Elijah took a long breath. "Sometimes. Not the politics, not the budgets, but the problem solving, the purpose." John nodded. "I know that feeling." They sat like that for a moment. 2 generations, 2 chapters of the same legacy. The hum of the instruments was soothing, like the quiet breathing of an old friend. Then John leaned back slightly. "Can I ask you something, off the record?" Elijah turned to him. "Of course. I looked up your file when I got the card. That badge. There was something I didn't understand." Elijah raised an eyebrow. "You were nominated for the National Civilian Medal of Valor in '92, but the record says you declined it. Why?" A long silence stretched between them. Elijah looked back at the panel, at the reflections in the glass. "Because I didn't want the noise." John didn't respond immediately. "I wasn't interested in the headlines," Elijah continued. "They called me a hero. But heroes get pulled into speeches, parades, handshakes, and they forget why they started. I didn't want to be a symbol. I wanted to keep building quietly. And, truth be told, I knew what would come with it." John's brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" "I was a black man from Alabama," Elijah said simply. "In the early '90s, being honored on national television didn't just bring praise, it brought attention, scrutiny, questions. I wanted peace, not cameras." John leaned back, absorbing that. "You ever regret it?" he asked. Elijah thought, then shook his head. "Not once. I found peace in the work. In knowing what I built kept people alive. That was enough." John smiled faintly. "Well, you may not have wanted the spotlight, but it found you today." Elijah let out a quiet chuckle. "Yes, and this time, I think I'm okay with it." The two sat in silence again, this time more comfortable. John broke it gently. You know, the hardest part of flying isn't takeoff or landing. It's the quiet, the cruise, when everything's smooth. That's when you either think too much or finally stop thinking altogether. Elijah nodded. It's where peace lives, if you let it. John looked at him with genuine admiration. I hope I can be a captain like you were a leader. Elijah smiled. Then don't try to be me. Be better. Learn from this. Lead with humility. Listen more than you talk. And when no one's watching, still do what's right. John gave a slow, deliberate nod. Yes, sir. The co-pilot's voice came through the headset. Ready when you are, Captain. John stood, offering Elijah a hand. Let's get you back to your seat, Mr. Brooks. We've got a flight to finish. Elijah stood with him, pausing at the doorway for one last look at the place he had once called home. He walked back to row 3A with dignity in every step. Liam leaned out as he passed. How was it? Elijah smiled, like stepping into a memory. The cabin lights dimmed as the crew began final preparations. Elijah sat back, buckled in, and let the soft vibration of the aircraft wrap around him like a lullaby. Out the window, the sky was starting to shift. The sun glinted off the tarmac, a soft golden glow that painted the world in warmth. Elijah took out the locket from his pocket and opened it. Marlene's face smiled up at him, timeless. He whispered, just loud enough for no one else to hear, I'm okay now. And for the first time in years, he meant it. The aircraft rolled gently onto the runway, the engines humming with anticipation, not roaring, not rushing, just steady, confident, like it knew this second departure meant more than just reaching a destination. Inside the cabin, passengers had settled into a calm that felt almost sacred. There was no chatter, no impatience. Even the usual rustling of bags, the clicking of seatbelts, felt softened by something bigger, a shared reverence for what they had just witnessed. Row 3A was quiet. Elijah sat upright, his seatbelt fastened, his hands resting gently on his lap. But his gaze, his whole focus, was out the window. The world beyond it stretched wide and golden, kissed by the low morning sun. The tarmac shimmered like a river of light. The aircraft turned, aligned with the runway. From the cockpit came the calm voice of Captain John Mitchell. Cabin crew, prepare for takeoff. Then the pause. The power surged. Not violent, not jarring, but purposeful, controlled. As the aircraft accelerated, Elijah felt the slight pressure against his chest, the familiar tilt of ascent. And then, weightlessness. The wheels lifted. The world below began to shrink. They were flying again. And this time, no one questioned whether Elijah belonged in that seat. No one dared. The city fell away, becoming a patchwork of movement and memory. The clouds greeted them like soft curtains parting for a quiet arrival. Elijah's fingers moved slowly, reaching into the inside pocket of his blazer. He pulled out the locket, held it carefully between his palms, then opened it one last time. Marlene's face, still captured in that timeless, mid-laugh photo, stared up at him. Warm, strong, kind. His eyes filled, but he didn't blink them away. Outside, the sky opened, vast and endless. He leaned closer to the window, voice barely above breath. We made it, baby. The words weren't dramatic. They weren't meant for anyone else, but they hung in the air with the power of a promise fulfilled. Elijah closed the locket and placed it gently back into his jacket. He leaned his head slightly against the window, not in weariness, but in peace. His eyes scanned the horizon, clear, unbroken, no turbulence, just sky. A few minutes later, footsteps approached softly. Liam. The young man stood beside Elijah's seat, hands in his pockets, a bashful expression on his face, like someone meeting a legend, still unsure how to say the right thing. Elijah turned and gave a small smile. Come to check on the old man? Liam chuckled. Not quite. I needed to say something. Elijah gestured to the empty middle seat. Sit. Liam did. For a moment they sat in silence, the drone of the engines filling the space like a quiet heartbeat. Then Liam spoke. You changed the way I see things. Elijah raised an eyebrow. How so? I grew up thinking heroes wore uniforms, capes, had awards, speeches, statues. He looked at Elijah with awe, tempered by something deeper, respect. But today, I saw a man get treated like nothing. And then I found out he's the reason hundreds of people are alive, including my dad. He swallowed hard. And you never asked to be seen. You never asked to be honored. You just did your work. Elijah's gaze softened. Liam continued. I used to think legacy was about attention, but now I know it's about impact. He paused, then added with quiet certainty, I'm going to tell your story. Not just on social media, not just with a hashtag. I'm going to carry it. Make sure people like me, people my age, understand who really built the world we fly through. Elijah said nothing for a while. He just looked at Liam. Then he reached over, placed a hand gently on the young man's shoulder, and nodded. That means more than any medal. Liam smiled. I don't know where your seat is, Elijah added, but I think this one's yours for a while. They both laughed softly. As the flight leveled out and the seatbelt sign blinked off, a soft chime played through the speakers. Captain Mitchell's voice returned. Ladies and gentlemen, we've reached cruising altitude. We expect smooth skies all the way to San Diego. Flight attendants will begin beverage service shortly. Another pause. Then, off script. And if you happen to be sitting near 3A, consider yourself lucky. You're next to living history. Laughter rippled gently through the cabin. Elijah looked over at Liam, shaking his head with amused disbelief. You're really not letting this quiet down, are you? Liam grinned. Not a chance. Then he pulled out his phone, but didn't press record. Instead, he opened the Notes app and began typing. Elijah watched him for a moment. You writing it already? Liam nodded. While it's fresh. Elijah leaned back in his seat, letting his eyes close for just a moment. He didn't need sleep. He didn't need rest. He just needed to feel what he was feeling now. A life lived in the background had finally stepped into the light, and not through force, not through anger, but through truth and quiet dignity. He had not sought this, but perhaps it had always been coming. And now, soaring 30,000 feet above the land he had quietly helped protect, with a young man beside him ready to carry the story forward, Elijah Brooks allowed himself something rare. Stillness. No more fighting, no more proving. Just flight and peace.